Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, I'm going to be making 10 cards with the Stamps of Life April 2021 card kit. Now before we get started with this card tutorial and my design process for all 10 cards, please consider subscribing to my channel by clicking that subscribe button and turning on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. So the card kit will come to you in a box like this, and it has so many fun goodies inside. So you always get this large storage envelope that you can use to store your card kit contents, or you can also store your cardstock sheets in there. You will also get a pack of envelopes and an idea card which has several ideas for different cards that you can make with the contents of the kit. And the cardstock colors are Mint Chip, Lemonade, Pixie, Bubblegum, Sky, Cherry, Blue Jay, Grape, and you always get 4 sheets of the powdered sugar, which is the white cardstock from the Stamps of Life. You will also get a stamp set, and it says there's always a reason to smile, and the smaller stamp says you just have to find it. And there are 2 small birds on that set, and it also has some matching dies for those birds. You also get a word die that says remember this, and it's the word with the shadow. You will also get this set of chipboard pieces. There are some chipboard words as well as some other elements that you can use on your cards. You will also get the epoxy dots in the same color palette as the cardstock, and then these kind of like gemstone type, rhinestone type flowers that you can use as little stickers on your cards. And then you get 2 ribbon, a thinner pink ribbon, and then a blue and white striped ribbon. You will also get the paper pad, and the paper pad is 24 sheets of double-sided pattern papers, and here are the different papers in the pad. So a lot of the designs are some raindrop designs in various colors. This sheet are the pieces that you can die cut from your club set for the month. So if you are a die-hard club member, you have the matching dies that will cut these birds and bird baths out of this paper pad. And if you don't have the matching dies, you can always just use scissors and cut those out on your own and use those on your cards. So you get some polka dots. This sheet says love in tiny circles. There's some fun purple patterns and some bird patterns. So all in all, you get 24 double-sided sheets of pattern papers. You also get a freebie this month, and this free die is a border die, and it comes with a shadow layer and the border. So once again, here are all the contents of the Stamps of Life April 2021 card kit. It is the Remember This collection, and I will put a link down in the description box that has a link to the various clubs that the Stamps of Life offers. So if you want more information on that, you can check that out. So I always like to start out these videos by taking the pages in the paper pad and using the matching dies to die cut the pieces out of the paper pad. So again, if you are a die-hard club member, you already have these dies, and if you're not and you want the dies, you can purchase them separately on the Stamps of Life website. So I'm just going to cut out all of the birds and the butterflies and the bird baths to use on my cards. So there are 2 pieces of these bushes, and I'm just fussy cutting these out. If you wanted to, I guess you can use the shadow die, but I'm just cutting the whole piece out because the shadow die is just the 2 bushes for the shadows. But this particular piece includes the bottom part of the bird bath, so I'm just going to fussy cut this out of the paper pad. I just think that's the easiest to do. And all in all, you get 8 bird baths, 24 birds, 12 butterflies, and then the 2 sets of bushes. So for card 1, I'm using the bird bath die cut. I do decide to trim around the bird bath just to cut off some of the excess white around it, because I am going to be bringing in some of the bushes, and I just didn't want to have so much white showing around the edges. I die cut those birds from the paper pad using the top layering die just to get some of the extra white off of those as well, and end up bringing in a black marker just to color up those feet, because some of those birds still had some white on the edges of the feet. I do have a dotted oval die that I die cut that pattern paper and just inked up the edges with some cherry ink, and I'm layering that on a piece of cherry cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I'm layering that piece onto a piece of sky cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I'm just going to build my scene. So with the bushes, I'm just going to lay the bushes down first. That has the half piece of the bird bath, and then just lay the blue bird bath right on top of that. And then I'm just going to lay the birds down. I do bring in another bird, and I'm going to be bringing in the butterfly, and I'm stamping the sentiment, "I'm so sorry." That sentiment is from the Birdbath2Stamp stamp set, so if you are in the stamp club or in the Die Hard club, you have your matching stamps. And then I just ink up the edges with some cherry ink, and then add the sentiment to the card, and then just add each one of the birds and the butterfly to the card. Now I do want to mention that I do have a coordinating blog post, so all the measurements will be in the coordinating blog post, and if there's any additional supplies that I use on my cards, those will be in that blog post as well. And a link to that blog post will be down in the description box. So here I'm just adding that card layer to an A2 size card base. And I'm just adding some ribbon to the front of the bird bath, and I'll just add that with some hot glue. And then I'm going to use my Nuvo crystal drops in dandelion yellow and just add a little bit of dimension there to the butterfly. When I die cut that butterfly, it actually cut the holes out of the wings, so I wanted to fill those back in. For my next card, I die cut a stitched circle, and I'm actually bringing in last month's stamp set, which is the Flowers to Layer set, and I'm just stamping out some of these flowers just there on the edge of this stitched circle using some black ink. And I'm actually using the Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and the reason why I'm using this ink is because I am going to be doing some coloring with my alcohol markers, and in fact the paper that I'm using is my Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth cardstock, which is what I use when I color with alcohol markers. So stamping out the bird. Now this bird is the small bird stamp, as well as this one that came in the card kit. I'm just stamping out some leaves there, and then I'm going to do some coloring. So I'm going to color up these leaves. So for the leaves, I'm just using my YG 11 and YG 17. So for the center of those leaves, I use the darker, which is the YG 17, and then just go over all of that with the lighter green, which is the YG 11. And I do that for all of the leaves. I actually go over it twice because I wanted it to be just a little bit darker. So just do that same process again 2 times. So lay the dark down and then lay the light down. And then for the flower, that purple one, it's the V12 is the lightest, and V15 is the mid shade, and then V17 is the dark. And then for the pinks, I'm using RV11, 13, and 14. I will also include all of these colors in my coordinating blog post, so if you happen to have Copic markers and you want to duplicate these cards using the same colors that I'm using, you can take a look at that. So the purple, it's the same purple that I used in the flower because I wanted to have a consistent look. I didn't want to bring in any different color purples, so just using the same color there. And then for the yellows, I'm using the Y13, 15, and 17. To color up the wings, and then bring in some more purple there for the top of the head, and then bringing in some blues for the body in the middle. The blues are the B91, B93, and B97. And then the pinks here for the bird, it's going to be the same pinks that I used in the flowers. Again, trying to be consistent and keeping the colors the same. So just creating a little scene here on this stitched circle using the stamps. And then next I'm going to bring in my thin black Sharpie. I'm just going to trace over the tops of those flowers just to make them a little bit darker because I didn't get quite a dark impression when I stamped it out initially. I'm just inking up the edges here with the Pixie, which is the light purple ink. inked up the edges of both the circle and then that raindrop pattern paper. And that raindrop paper measures 4 by 5 1/4, and then I'm just putting that circle off the edge there on the left, and I'm just going to trim off that excess cardstock. And off camera, I stamped out the sentiment, "There's always a reason to smile." Just stamp that out with some black ink, and I'm adding that entire layer onto a piece of the grape cardstock, and that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I take a white A2 size card base and just stamp out the sentiment. You just have to find it on the inside, and then add that entire layer to the front of the A2 size card base. So it says, "There's always a reason to smile, you just have to find it." And then just add some epoxy dots to the front of that card, and that will complete this card. For my next card, I stamped the bushes onto some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth cardstock, stamped them with my Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm coloring them with my Copic markers. So I laid down my lightest color green, which is my G20 Copic marker, and then came in with my darker colors, G46 and G43, and just put a bunch of dots to add some texture to that grass. And I go over it a few times, so adding some dark dots, adding some medium shade dots, and I just continue to go over that a few times just to add some more texture and dimension to those bushes. I do come in with some pink colors and also some purples, some yellows, just to finish up coloring that little scene. I will put all of these colors in my blog post, so if you want to duplicate this, you can head over to my blog and check out the colors that I've used. I have this yellow raindrop paper that measures 5 1/4 by 4. I stamp out the sentiment and put it there off to the left of that pattern paper. Die cut one of the borders, that's the free gift from Stephanie, and die cut it with some mint chip cardstock. Just inked up the edges with the mint chip ink, and now I'm just placing everything where I want it to go. So I'm just going to tuck the bushes behind the bird bath. I am going to bring in the blue bird bath. I think it adds some nice color to this card. So I'm just tucking them behind there, and then I'll add the bird bath last just to make sure that it is over top of the bushes. And then after I add the bird bath, I'm going to add that border along the bottom. And what's nice about this border is I can use it just to simulate grass on this card. So you can use it as a decorative border or as grass to create these fun scenes. And then I'm going to add a bird there to the top of the bird bath and add a butterfly to the front of this card layer, and then add that card layer to a piece of sky cardstock that is cut down to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and then that entire layer will be placed on an A2 size white card base. I will finish up by adding just a few epoxy dots in the cherry or pink color to the front of this card, and that will complete this card. For my next card, I'm taking 2 stitched rectangle dies, one that's slightly larger than the other, and just layering those together, die cutting a piece of Blue Jay cardstock to create this fun border. And then I'm just inking up the edges with some of the Blue Jay ink just to add some dimension to this cardstock. I also have a piece of that Blue Jay raindrop pattern paper, and that's cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I also inked up the edges of that with the Blue Jay ink as well. I'm going to use the stamp to place in the center of that border, and I'm just placing it here just to make sure I kind of see where I want it to go. And I'm just putting my finger there so that I know that's where I want the top of that stamp, and then just stamping it down on that pattern paper. And then I'm going to take that border and I'm going to just add some foam adhesive because I want that border to pop up on the card. Now I thought about making this into a shaker card, and you totally could make this into a shaker card using the method that I'm doing here, only you would have to make sure you put a layer of acetate underneath that border before you add your adhesive. So you can glue a piece of acetate to the bottom part, add the foam adhesive, and then you can put some shaker elements and just attach it to your card. But I'm kind of just leaving it open instead of adding a shaker element to this card just to keep it a little bit simple. But I did want to add that dimension by adding the foam. You could always adhere it flat to the card as well. I am bringing in this flower and the leaves from last month's Stamps of Life card kit. I had a few of these extra die cut pieces from the Sweet Moments paper pad. If you don't have that paper pad and you wanted to add flowers, maybe you have the stamp set that corresponds to this, and that's the Flowers to Layer stamp set, and you could always color up or die cut some flowers and add them here. So I'm just putting some foam, I'm cutting some double-sided adhesive foam and just sticking it underneath the part of the flowers that is not the petals that aren't adhered to the border. So I wanted to make sure that they had a sturdy backing on them. And then I did die cut using the layering die, the top layering die, the butterfly and the bird, rather than having so much white extend on the edges of it. So rather than using the shadow die, I did the top layering piece to die cut that out. And I was just covering up some of the white by using a black pen because some of the white was still showing. And then I just attached that layer to a piece of Blue Jay cardstock that measures 4¼ by 5½, and then that entire layer will be placed onto an A2 size card base. I also cut some foam down into some small pieces just to put underneath that bird's wing, because part of the wing and part of the feet are going off of that border, and I wanted again to make sure that it has a sturdy backing on it. So I'm just tucking some foam underneath there, and then I'm adding some of my Nuvo crystal drops in the dandelion yellow to the butterfly and the center of the flower, and that completes that card. For my next card, I knew that I wanted to take that sentiment and I wanted to have it in different colors. So I took out my Misty and I covered up the word theirs in the stamp, and then took my cherry ink and inked up that swirl at the top of that stamp, and then pressed it down onto my cardstock. And then I came in and just cleaned off the ink off that stamp. Just took a paper towel and then just made sure all the water was up from that stamp, and I did the process again. So here I'm just putting some washi tape to cover up a couple more of the words. This time I'm covering up the word always and the word a reason. Just taking some washi tape to cover up those words as well as the words to smile. And then I'm taking my mint chip ink and I'm inking up the little, I guess they're leaves at the end of the word a reason. So I'm just inking them up in the mint chip ink, then removing the washi tape and then pressing down. I am using a scalloped square that I die cut out of some powdered sugar cardstock. That's already there adhered to my Misty. And then I'm coming in and cleaning off that stamp again, and I'm just adding some more washi tape to cover up some more words. This time I'm covering up the words a reason and the word to, inking up the word smile and the swirl border underneath it with some cherry ink, removing my washi tape and then stamping it down. So what's nice about doing it this way is that using the Misty, the stamp remains in place. Each time I have to go stamp it, it's going to remain in place, and I don't have to worry about, you know, just using a stamping block and trying to do this on my own with just a stamping block, because I would never get all of these words in the same exact position. So using the Misty is very helpful in that way. So here, after I cleaned off my stamp, I'm just using some washi tape, and now I'm covering up all of those previous pieces of that stamp. So the swirls, the word smile, and also those little leaves on that extend on the edges of that stamp. And this time I'm going to ink up the rest of those words just in some black ink. So laying my black ink down, and then once I have it down, just removing all of that washi tape. And then once I have all of that removed, I just need to carefully check and make sure that black didn't get anywhere else, and then I can stamp it down, and you can see that it just stamps everything down in place because that scalloped square was actually held down with magnets and the scallop square piece did not move. So just inking that up, pressing that down really well, and there is my stamp. Now I do come in with a black pen and just kind of go over that black again. I could have went back to my Misty and put washi tape over all of those other pieces again and then ink that up with black, but I figured it was going to be easier just to take a thin black pen, it's like a black marker, and just go over those words, and just to make sure that I had a really good impression. So that's what I'm doing, just because it was easier for me to do it that way rather than doing the washi tape all over again. And here is my stamp. And notice that I stamped it towards the left of that scallop square. And you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm layering that onto a larger scallop square that I die cut out of lemonade. And I also die cut a white border I'm going to include on this card layer. I'm also going to bring in the bird bath in the silver and some of the butterflies and a bird. I'm going to go ahead and layer on the scalloped square onto that purple paper. That purple pattern paper measures 5¼ by 4. And then I'm just going to add some glue to this white border. I'm going to add that white border just along the bottom there of that card layer. And then I'm just going to trim off the excess, and then that bird bath is going to go right there to the right of that scalloped square. So that's why I stamped the sentiment a little bit towards the left, because I wanted to have room there so I could put the bird bath, and also so that I can put some butterflies to the right of the sentiment. I also took the bird bath dies and die cut those little vines from the mint chip paper, and I did put some ink on the edges of them just to add some texture, just adding them there to the bird bath. And then I'm going to add the bird and a couple of the butterflies to my card layer. And then I'm going to add that entire layer to a piece of the lemonade cardstock that's cut down to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then that entire layer will be added to a piece of grape cardstock that's cut down to 5½ by 4 1/4. And then that will go on an A2 size white card base. And again, an A2 size card base, it measures 4 1/4 by 5½. And that completes this card. For my next card, I'm going to be making a slimline card, and I'm using the Stitch Square Slimline Drop-In from the Stamps of Life. And I'm layering up these 2 dies and then adding a third large rectangle die from the Slimline Card die set around the 2 smaller dies, and adding some washi tape, and then just die cutting that out of some bubblegum cardstock. And when that die comes out of the die cutting machine, you get the piece that's there on the left hand side. And then I'm taking the middle layering die and just die cutting the raindrop rainbow pattern out of those 3 square openings. Next, I'm going to add that triple square piece to a piece of lemonade cardstock that measures 3 3/8 by 8 3/8. So just glue that right on top, lay it right on top, and then I'm going to glue each one of these squares into those openings. Next, I'm going to start to lay out my scene on this card, but I know I want to bring in a waterfall for that bird bath, so I'm going to be doing some embossing. So I have a piece of the white cardstock. I did add some powder to it, and then just stamping out the waterfall using some Versamark ink, taking some blue embossing powder, sprinkling that on, and then I'm going to just use my heat tool to heat set that embossing powder. And then I'm going to use the matching die and die cut that out. So I'm going to take my bird bath and just use my craft knife and cut a slit through the middle of that bird bath, and then stick my waterfall right in the middle of the bird bath. And I'm going to use some double-sided tape just to make sure this stays in place, just to kind of keep it down before I add some glue to it. So I add a piece to the back side and to the inside of that bird bath, and then I'm just going to add some glue after taking the backing off of that tape and then adding that to my slimline card. I'm bringing in the cloud chipboard pieces, and I'm stamping the word hello onto one of the clouds, and then I'll add them there to create my scene. And that word hello is from the Birdbath2Stamp stamp set. And then I'm also going to bring in the flowers and add the flowers at the bottom. I'm going to bring in a couple of the birds. I'm also going to bring in the word friend from the chipboard piece, and then just add that across the center of the bird bath. So the sentiment there is going to say hello friend. And then I'm going to add that entire layer to a slimline card base. You can use the Slimline Card die set to die cut your card base, and that's from the Stamps of Life, or you can just cut your card base on your own by taking a piece of 8½ by 11 cardstock, cutting it down to 8½ by 7, and scoring at 3½. So that completes this slimline card, and moving on to card 7, I'm going to be using 5 by 7 Swirly Sun die set from the Stamps of Life. I thought this would be perfect for the front of a card, so I die cut the top layering die out of some lemonade cardstock. I didn't have a full piece of lemonade cardstock, so I just used what I had, and that's okay because my sun is going to be off of the page anyway. So I inked up the edges with some banana ink, both the center and the outside. And I'm bringing in Faces for Stamps. It's a stamp set with various smiley faces on it. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp that out for the center of that sun, just stamping out with some black ink. And I have this raindrop layering piece, which measures 5¼ by 4. And notice that I did stamp out the sentiment there off to the right already on that raindrop pattern paper. And then I'm pressing down on my sun, and then I'm just going to trim off the edges. Now, when I do this, first of all, I want you to notice that the piece that I did not fully die cut was off on the edge, so I went ahead and just cut that off. And now here I'm trying to place the center of the sun, and I had a really difficult time doing that. The center of my sun would not fit for some reason in the center, and I guess that was because of the way that I laid my sun down and glued it. I didn't make sure I had the complete circle, so I end up having to just start over with another piece of this sky raindrop pattern paper. But this time I go ahead and just ink up the edges of that cardstock with some sky ink. See, second time around, I always find things just to add. So then I went ahead and just die cut the sun again, inked up the edges. So I'm just starting over here. And I put half of it off the page, just like I did previously, or off of that card layer. But notice I did not add the smiley face this time. I'm going to wait until after I get that in the sun to add the smiley face, just to make sure that it ends up being straight. So notice that I put that center part in first. I'm just using some tape adhesive just to add that down in case I need to pick it back up and add it again. That's why I did that, because the glue is much stronger. And once I add the glue, there's no way of picking up the cardstock if I need to reposition it. So adding the center part of that sun first was important in making sure that that entire circle remains a circle and I'm able to piece those pieces perfectly together. Because before adding the sun layers, the rays first, and then trying to piece in the circle, it did not work for me. So here I'm able to make sure I get a complete circle around that center part. Just add the sun and glue down all of those rays, and then I'll be able to trim off the excess. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that smiley face to the center of that sun. I'm loving how this card is turning out. I think it's super cute. And then adding that layer to a piece of sky cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. I will add some birds there to the front of that card. And then I already stamped out the sentiment on the inside using an A2 size white card base, and then adding that layer to the front of that card base. And then I take my R20 Copic marker and just add some cheeks to that sun, and that completes this card. For my next card, I'm using the free border die that was included with the card kit, and I die cut 5 borders out of the different color solid cardstock. So I have a grape, then I'm moving on to the mint chip. I did not put the double-sided adhesive on the back. I chose just to use glue. I just thought it would be easier than worrying about the double-sided adhesive and trying to poke the holes out of all of those little holes out of that border, so I'm just using glue. And notice how I'm just layering them up, and I'm layering them up on a piece of powdered sugar cardstock that measures 4 by 5 1/4. And then I move on to the lemonade, and then I will end with the pixie. So just layered up 5 of them at the very bottom, and then after I do that, I'm going to be bringing in the pink ribbon, and I add the ribbon to the top of the pixie. I do put some just double-sided adhesive tape on the entire ribbon there just to keep it down on that white cardstock. Wrap the edges around the back and just add some double-sided tape around the back of that cardstock layer. I am bringing in the Hello chipboard piece, add some glue to that, and I'm going to add 3 butterflies. And just kind of like they're extending from that O in the word hello. I add a purple, a mint chip, and then another purple. And then I'm just going to add that layer to a A2 size card base. And I'm also going to be bringing in some silver gems, just some little silver gems just to extend beyond those butterflies, just to kind of portray movement, but adds a little bling as well. And I'm going to do that for all 3 of those butterflies, and then that will complete this card. For card 9, I'm making this a sympathy card, and I'm using the lattice background die from the Stamps of Life, which I die cut out of some of the white or powdered sugar cardstock, and I'm just adding some glue to the back of that background die, and I'm adding that to the front of an A2 size white card base. I've already stamped out the We're So Sorry, and I'm going to be bringing in the bird bath and some of the bushes. So I'm going to add the bushes first, and then I'm going to add the bird bath right on top. The sentiment that I use, the We're So Sorry, it is from the Sympathy to Stamp stamp set, and I stamped that onto a stitched oval that I die cut out of some powdered sugar cardstock. I am going to add the butterfly and a bird to the front of this card. I'm also going to be bringing in the little flower gem stickers and add them to the front of the bird bath, almost like they're growing in the bushes, kind of extending onto the bird bath as flowers in those bushes. I thought that was really pretty. And then on the inside, I die cut a stitched rectangle die and then stamped the sentiment on the inside. Although no words can really help to ease the loss you bear, just know that you are very close in every thought and prayer. And that stamp is from the same Sympathy to Stamp stamp set. And that completes this card. So moving on to my next card, I am going to be making a slimline card using the floral slimline panel die from the Stamps of Life. I've already cut down a piece of the powdered sugar cardstock to size and put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back, and just layering up the large rectangle with the panel die and then running that through my die cut machine. And when that comes out of the die cut machine, I'm getting this fun background die that I went ahead and added to a slimline sized card base. And then I ran that panel die through the die cut machine again on some cherry cardstock to get the flowers that I can actually piece in back into this slimline panel. And I didn't have double-sided adhesive tape on the back, so I am using glue to adhere each one of those flowers. And then once I have all of that done, I set that aside and I take the Remember This word die and die cut the letters out of the sky cardstock. I did put double-sided adhesive tape on the back of that sky cardstock before running it through my die cut machine because those letters are very intricate. And then back that up on a shadow layer that I cut out of the powdered sugar cardstock, and then just adding a couple of the birds down there next to the sentiment, one facing each way of the sentiment, and then tying a bow out of the blue cardstock and then adding the sentiment to the inside using some sky ink, and that completes this card. So here are all the 10 cards that I created with the Stamps of Life April 2021 card kit. So please leave me a comment down below and let me know which card was your favorite. And again, if you like videos like this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel by clicking that subscribe button. And you can also follow me over on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. And as always, if you liked this video, please click that like button. And thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.